24 hours. That's all you've got. Funny how a ticking clock suddenly makes everyone listen a little closer, breathe a little faster. Nothing gets the blood moving like a deadline wrapped in divine warning. And you've been playing this little game, haven't you? Dipping your toe in the fire, whispering prayers you don't plan to answer, waiting for a sign while ignoring the scream. But now the clock's loud. Now the silence around you isn't empty, it's loaded. And the message, oh, it's clear. No riddles, no metaphors, you're not being asked, you're being told. Oh, you think waiting is harmless. You think dragging your feet, stalling, hesitating, pretending you didn't hear the call, you think that's nothing. Just buying time, just being careful. But let me tell you a secret. Time hears everything, it records it. And when you delay what you know you were supposed to do, that's not caution. That's rebellion in a tuxedo, smiling politely while it burns your future in the background. You're not confused. You're not lost. You're just scared to obey because obedience costs. And you're not sure you're willing to pay the price you tell yourself you're waiting for a sign, for confirmation, for another dream, another voice, another miracle, and nudge. But deep down you already know. You've always known. It's not clarity you're missing. It's courage. You're not asking for more direction. You're asking for a way out. You're hoping if you wait long enough, the fire will die down and the pressure will pass. But that's not how this works. See, when something holy marks you, it doesn't leave just because you ignore it. It waits. And the longer you delay, the heavier it gets. Funny thing about disobedience, most people don't recognize it in themselves because they're not out committing crimes or starting fires. They're just not moving, just postponing, just thinking about it, but not stepping when you're told to step, not speaking when you're told to speak, not leaving when you're told to leave. That's defiance dressed up in logics. That's rebellion wearing a name tag that says wisdom. You think because you're not acting against, you're still aligned. But delayed obedience is still disobedience. You don't get credit for eventually doing what you were supposed to do when it's too late. You're standing on the edge of a divine assignment and talking about timing. Timing. The moment chose you, and you're standing there bargaining with it like it's a street vendor, asking for discounts, hoping to reschedule, trying to fit a kingdom task into your broken calendar. You don't get to rearrange wholly. Instructions to fit your mood. You don't get to slow walk your way into purpose while dragging your feet through excuses. You were told. That's enough. And every second you spend stalling, something around you is unraveling. You ever wonder why the pressure keeps increasing? Why the tension in your chest doesn't go away even after the crying, the praying, the journaling? It's not depression. It's not confusion. It's conviction. It's the sound of delayed purpose turning into spiritual rot. Because disobedience doesn't just stall progress, it attracts consequences. And not the flashy, dramatic ones. The slow, sneaky ones. The missed connections. The silent exits. The friendships that start to wither. The joy that quietly evaporates without explanation. That's what delayed obedience does. It steals in silence, and here's the kicker, you'll justify it. You'll dress it up with noble intentions. I just want to be sure. I don't want to mess it up. I need to pray more. But behind all those sweet little phrases is a fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of change. But fear doesn't get to vote when you've been called. Fear doesn't get to override the instruction. You weren't asked to understand it. You were told to obey. And the more you wait, the more expensive it becomes. The longer you hesitate, the more you lose without even realizing it. People think rebellion is loud, violent, and obvious. But the most dangerous kind is quiet, polite, looks like patience, sounds like wisdom, feels like nothing at all until one day you wake up and realize the moment passed, the door closed, the opportunity dissolved into dust, and you're left holding the echo of what could have been. You're not being punished. You're being reminded. That call wasn't optional. That moment wasn't a suggestion. That assignment had a clock on it, and you heard it ticking but kept hitting snooze. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. Honest enough to admit you're scared. Honest enough to admit you don't want to obey because obedience means letting go of control, of image, of comfort. But if you're really chosen, if that word actually means something to you, then obedience isn't just a task, it's your oxygen. And every breath you take in delay, it's borrowed from a timeline that's shrinking with every heartbeat that pretends it has time left to waste. Tick, tick, time. Tick, hear that? It's not just a clock. It's not just time passing. That's grace slipping through your fingers like sand soaked in gasoline. And everyone loves to talk about grace like it's this endless river of hugs and lullabies, but they forget it's got limits. Not because it's cruel, but because it's real. And real grace doesn't exist to keep you comfortable. It exists to give you a window, a shot, a divine countdown that says move now or lose it. You keep thinking you've got time. You treat tomorrow like it owes you. You roll over purpose like it's an alarm clock you can snooze. You confuse mercy with permission and think because nothing bad's happened yet nothing will. But that's not mercy. That's mercy waiting. Waiting for you to obey. Waiting for you to stop pretending you're confused when really you're just afraid. And that waiting, that's grace. But even grace gets tired of being ignored. The clock isn't your enemy. It's your lifeline. It's the last warning before the shift. It's the ticking sound in your spirit when the lights go out and you know you're supposed to be doing something else with your life. Something bigger, something harder, but you keep stalling, smiling, posting quotes online like they're going to move the mountain for you. You want divine intervention, but you won't make a divine decision. You want a miracle, but won't take a single obedient step. You're going to move the mountain for you. You want divine intervention, but you won't make a divine decision. You want a miracle, but won't take a single obedient step. Grace isn't passive. It's a countdown with consequences. It opens a door, but it doesn't hold it open forever. And while you're debating, while you're calculating risk like some scared little accountant, you're bleeding time. You're spending energy arguing with a God who already said go. But grace doesn't argue back. It just waits silently until it doesn't. Until the day you turn around and the door you assumed would always be there has vanished. You think you're being careful, measured, wise, but you're playing chicken with eternity. You're standing in front of destiny and asking for a refund, pretending you didn't already say yes. You said yes in your tears, you said yes in the pain, you said yes when no one was watching. But now that the moment's here, you want to pretend like you didn't sign up for this. You want to negotiate with heaven, rewrite the terms, stall the clock. But that's not how it works. Grace isn't a contract, it's a countdown. And you're burning through minutes like they don't matter. You don't get to pick when it all aligns. You don't get to schedule your breakthrough around your comfort. This isn't about your mood. It's about obedience. And the longer you wait, the more your peace rots from the inside out. That twitch in your gut, that pressure on your chest, that's not anxiety. That's time running out. That's heaven trying to pull you before the ground under you collapses, and it collapses. And the more you resist, the more unstable everything becomes. Not because you're cursed, but because you're late. The universe doesn't wait forever. Purpose doesn't pause for your doubts. And grace gives you a moment. A clear, terrifying, undeniable moment. And it says here, now, go, but most people want to back up. Plan, a guarantee, a promise that they'll land softly. They want grace to carry them and pamper them. But grace doesn't do cuddles. Grace says, I'm giving you just enough time to jump. If you don't, I'm gone. And when it goes, it doesn't slam the door. It just disappears. Quietly. Completely, like it was never there. You think grace will come back around. Maybe it will. Maybe. But it won't be the same. Because you won't be the same. The next version of grace might come with scars, with heavier consequences, with less light and more fire. And you'll have to crawl out of holes you were never meant to fall into just because you hesitated when you should have obeyed. Because you sat in a burning house and called it patience. Because you thought grace meant safety when really it meant urgency. Every second you waste is a sacrifice you didn't agree to, a cost you didn't count. And the sad part, you think you're avoiding pain by waiting, but all you're doing is trading now pain for later destruction. You're gambling peace on the hope that grace will stay loyal to your laziness. But grace isn't loyal to fear. It's loyal to purpose. And if you won't move, grace will find someone who will, cozen. Oh, what a delicious little word. Sounds flattering, doesn't it? Like you've been handpicked, dipped in gold, kissed by the divine. People hear that word and their eyes light up like it means VIP access to comfort, applause, and heavenly upgrades. But being chosen doesn't mean you get to skip the fire. It means you walk into it. It doesn't mean you get favors. It means you get responsibility. You don't get a throne, you get a burden. Not because the universe is cruel, but because it trusts you to carry what would crush everyone else. Everyone wants the glory. Nobody wants the cost. You don't get to be chosen and stay soft. You don't get to be marked and live small. See, when you're chosen, your life is no longer your own. You don't get to blend in. You don't get to ignore the whispers. You don't get to pretend you didn't feel that fire in your chest when you walked away from something you knew you were supposed to confront. You're different. But different ain't always a gift. Sometimes it's a sentence they told you being chosen would feel holy, like candles and choirs and sunshine. But they didn't tell you it would feel like betrayal, like isolation, like carrying a weight that no one else can see but everyone expects you to bear without complaint. They didn't tell you that the calling would wake you up in the middle of the night with no answers and no applause. That it would wreck your plans, your relationships, your sense of safety. Because being chosen doesn't mean you're favored, it means you're set apart. And being set apart, that's just a polite way of saying you're going to be lonely a lot. You think chosen means elevated, but it really means crucified. It means misunderstood. It means targeted. Because the moment you're chosen, you become a threat to darkness, to mediocrity, to people who are comfortable playing small. You become a walking mirror, showing everyone around you what they could be if they weren't so afraid. And they'll hate you for it, not always out loud. Sometimes with silence. Sometimes with fake smiles. Sometimes with passive-aggressive compliments that feel more like bullets than blessings, and still, you'll be expected to carry it, to lead, to speak, to build, to love people who spit in your direction and say it's rain, to forgive people who stab you while asking for your prayers, to stay soft in a world that feeds off cruelty. You'll be expected to show up with light when all you want to do is burn everything down and disappear into the shadows. Because you're chosen, not comfortable, not safe, chosen. People want your outcome, they want your results, they want your anointing, but they don't want your isolation. They don't want the nights you cried so hard your body shook. They don't want the betrayal, the loss, the pressure. They just want the glow, the end result, the mountaintop. But they forget every mountaintop is built on broken bones and buried egos. Every chosen one walks through valleys that look like graves, and most of the time the people they're trying to save are the same ones throwing stones. You don't get to be chosen and normal. You don't get to walk away from the call because it gets heavy. You can try. Go ahead. Pretend you're fine in the crowd. Shrink yourself to fit in their expectations. Trade your fire for their approval, but it won't last, because when you're chosen, nothing else fits. The noise won't satisfy. The applause will turn hollow. The distractions will rot. Because deep down, you know you were born for more than survival. And when you try to live below that, everything in you starts to suffocate. Being chosen ruins you. In the best, most terrifying way. It makes you allergic to mediocrity. It makes you restless in shallow spaces. It makes you ache when you see people settle, because you remember the moment your own fire ignited. And even when you try to dim it, that flame doesn't die. It just flickers in protest, waiting, watching, reminding you that your life has a weight, that your words have consequences, That your silence isn't neutral, it's disobedience in costume chosen doesn't mean blessed and untouchable. It means accountable. It means you walk with pressure, with purpose, with precision. You don't get to move like everybody else. You don't get to respond like everybody else. You don't get to hide even when hiding would be easier. Because when you're chosen, comfort is no longer your compass. Obedience is, even when it hurts. Even when it costs you everything you thought you needed just to feel safe. Yes, clarity. That shiny little lie everyone chases like a rat in a maze, thinking if they could just understand, then they'd move. If they could just see the full picture, get a guarantee, know how it ends, then they'd finally obey. But here's the problem with that fantasy: it turns you into a junkie, sniffing for signs instead of stepping into the storm. You want God to explain, but explanations are the luxury of spectators. Obedience is the currency of the chosen. You think you're waiting on clarity, but clarity is waiting on you. It's on the other side of the leap, not before, never before. Because clarity is a reward, not a prerequisite. Obedience is the ugly bridge you have to cross with shaking knees and zero visibility. And only when you're halfway across, terrified, doubting, exhausted, does the fog lift. And even then, just enough for one more step, never the whole road. Never the ending. You want a map. You're being handed a match, but no, you want the blueprint, the schedule, the timeline with tidy little boxes and golden stars that say, yes, everything will work out exactly the way you hope. But real faith is raw. It's messy, it's irrational. It's stepping into rooms with no light, climbing mountains that weren't on the brochure, losing things you thought were permanent just to find out they were distractions dressed as stability. Obedience doesn't guarantee safety. It guarantees confrontation with fear, with ego, with control. And that's what most people can't stomach. They want clarity so they can stay in control. They want clarity so they won't look stupid, so they won't fail in public, so they can have the answers ready when everyone asks, why are you doing this? But sometimes the answer is just because I was told to. And that's not good enough for the world, but it has to be good enough for you. Because if you're chosen, the instructions won't always come with explanations. The call doesn't come with context. You don't get the why until after the war. And don't fool yourself into thinking your obedience is small. There's no such thing. You don't see what shakes in the unseen when you simply say yes. You don't see what demons get disarmed when you take one obedient step. The shift isn't always visible. Sometimes the loudest move is the quietest action, a decision no one claps for, a surrender no one sees, but heaven hears it, hell fears it, and your future needs it. Still you wait. You stall. You sit with your fingers crossed, waiting for heaven to hand you an instruction manual. But this isn't IKEA, this is war. And the weapon isn't knowledge, it's obedience. And war doesn't ask if you feel ready. It doesn't ask if you understand. It says, march. And if you hesitate too long, the moment will pass. And that's the part no one warns you about. The clock on the call, the expiration date on the window. Grace opens doors, yes, but not forever. At some point, the door becomes a wall, and you'll be standing there holding your brilliant reasons, your noble hesitations, your fear-drenched excuses, and none of them will matter. You can either obey in confusion or rebel in comfort. That's the choice. You don't get both. You don't get the fire without the burn. You don't get to carry oil without first being crushed. But no, you keep waiting for the feeling. You keep waiting to feel ready. As if readiness was ever part of the plan. You weren't chosen because you were ready. You were chosen because you were willing. Or at least you said you were in the irony. The more you obey, the clearer things get. Every act of obedience sharpens your hearing, strengthens your steps. But you'll never know that if you wait for clarity before you move. That's the trap. That's how people die, sitting in places they were only meant to pass through because they thought obedience was optional until the lights came on. But the light doesn't come until you move. The clarity doesn't come until after the cost. That's how this works, and deep down you know it. That's why your soul itches every time you choose comfort over calling. That's why your peace is poisoned the moment you trade obedience for overthinking. You keep looking for signs when the real signal was the silence that screamed at you when you didn't move. You keep asking for confirmation when the instructions were clear the first time. You keep begging for direction while ignoring the last direction you were given. You don't need more clarity, you need more courage. But courage doesn't come gift-wrapped. It's grown in chaos, in resistance, in the furnace of obedience when everything in you wants to run the other way. Aha, excuses. The perfume of the pitiful, the lullaby of the lazy. So elegant, so convincing, so perfectly tailored to your fears that even you forget you're lying. Not to others, to yourself. Every time you say, I'm waiting for the right moment, what you really mean is I'm scared to start. Every time you mutter, I'm not ready, what you mean is I'd rather stay in the illusion of safety than step into distant of growth. And the wildest part, you actually believe your own voice. That whisper you dressed up in logic and concern. That careful tone pretending to be wise, it's not wisdom. It's a thief, wearing your voice, robbing your future. And you're letting it you want to obey, but not without a cushion. Not without a plan B. Not without someone else doing it first so you can copy their blueprint and still pretend it was faith. You want to move, but only if you're guaranteed applause. You want to leap, but only if there's a net, and preferably a soft one, branded with your name, waiting to post your victory shot when you land. Because heaven forbid you fall. Heaven forbid you fail. You talk about obedience like it's bravery, but you're still addicted to control. Every excuse you use is handcrafted by fear and dipped in pride. I don't have the resources. Translation, I don't trust provision unless it's in my hand first. I'm still healing. Translation, I don't want to be uncomfortable again. I'm praying about it. Translation, I'm hoping if I wait long enough, the call will disappear. But the truth, you already know what you're supposed to do. You've known. The problem isn't clarity, it's compliance. You're not confused. You're delaying, hoping delay will somehow turn into denial and let you off the hook in the tragedy. Most people don't miss their calling because they're wicked. They miss it because they're waiting for the perfect conditions, for peace without price, for confirmation from people who never heard your instructions. So they build little cages out of calendar dates and to-do lists and call it being responsible, not realizing they're burying their obedience under bullet points. They think they're being safe. Really, they're being suffocated, not by the world. By their own rehearsed hesitations, you've become fluent in your excuses. You've made them poetic, sharpened them with just enough pain to make them sound noble. I've been hurt before. I need more time. I'm not sure I'm the right person. You say it with such conviction that even heaven starts to weep, not because you're weak, but because you're chosen and you're acting like a hostage. You've crowned your excuses king and made your fear the throne. You could move. You could leap. But instead you listen to the voice in your head telling you to wait, to calculate, to hesitate, and all the while, the moment slips you think your excuses are protecting you from pain, but they're just numbing you to the ache of disobedience. You think you're avoiding risk, but you're actually accepting regret on a payment plan. You don't feel it all at once. It creeps in, slowly, day by day, decision by decision, until one day the fire you once had is a flicker. Your dream? A shadow. Your purpose. An old story you tell yourself like a bedtime lie just to fall asleep at night, and the voice. Oh, it'll still be there, the thief wearing your tone. Still whispering. Still twisting your calling into a cautionary tale. Still feeding you reasons not to move while your destiny rots in a corner you stopped looking at. But here's the thing about thieves, they don't take what's worthless. Your obedience is dangerous. That's why fear attacks it. That's why excuses feel so real. Because the enemy doesn't mind you being talented, smart, even spiritual, as long as you're disobedient. As long as you keep giving your destiny CPR with words, instead of breathing life into it with action. And deep down, you know it. That restlessness you feel when you hear someone else step into what you were called to do. That fire that flares when you see someone walk the path you dodged. That ache that's your real self screaming from behind the mask of your excuses, trying to wake you up before it's too late. Before your obedience dies in a notebook full of ideas you never had the courage to act on. Before your legacy becomes a collection of almost and maybes in one day, but you've gotten used to that thief. You've made it a roommate. You've given it permission to narrate your life. So now you repeat it, over and over. Same voice, same phrases. And you call it discernment. But it's not.